Hi, we're going to run through the startup of the steam generation plant from the MC90V. So I have the instructions here. We know that there's some issues in it, so if you have a different variation, then for sure use that if you've edited your instructions. First thing, just assuming that electrical power is being supplied by one diesel generator and the seawater LTFW and air systems online. So let's just double check that. So electrical power plant, we have at least one generator that's functioning. I've got a cooling water system that appears to be functioning. I have a secondary cooling water system that appears to be functioning. And if I look at my service air system, this guy is pressurized, allowing me my controls to function. Looks like it's in remote mode, and if I double check the pump compressor control, it is in auto, so it will come on as it needs to. So I'm happy with where all my auxiliary systems are sitting, and now I'm going to worry about looking at the boiler. Boiler's made up of a few different pages. This page really deals with the water and steam side. This side is primarily focused on the steam side, and this is my combustion side. So I've got a few different pages that I'm going to be using. First one it shows is MD80. Check the boiler water level is within normal working limits. So, well, what are my limits? With this boiler, I have a first high and low level alarm that happen at -150. My target is going to be 0, and I have a high and low water cutout at ±300. So I'm below my level. From experience with this boiler, I know my level tends to swell as I heat up, but I think I'm maybe a little low right now. And also what I want to do before I even start the boiler is make sure that I do have water that can get in. So let's do both a test to make sure that I can get some water in, and while I'm doing that, let's raise the level. So I'll need to open up my valve here. That allows me my pathway through. My control valve is manually open at 50%. So I could close that off. I don't need to necessarily blast through a whole bunch of water, but so I'll set that down to say 10%. And I'm going to turn on my main feed water pump. I'm just going to use my main, not the auxiliary feed water pump. I don't use that in this scenario. So I'll bring up my water level to maybe -175 or -150 or so, and then I'm going to turn off my pump. While I'm waiting for myself to get up there, I'm going to just look at my next step, which is open the boiler vent valve and superheater steam line vent valve. So I have a couple of vents to open up. I can actually access them off of this page. So the boiler vent valve is here, and the superheater vent valve is there. So I think I'm in a reasonable range for my water level. So at this point, I'm going to turn off my pump. There's no real instructions as to how to leave it. So depending on what you've set up for your instructions, you may be leaving this in a different state with your water setup. But basically, we just want to make sure that we've got the pump off and we're not continuing to fill up the boiler at this point. So I just got number 2 done. Let's go to number 3. So page 5, and we've got a few valves to open up. So what I want to do is create a pathway for diesel oil to the boiler. I want to also create a pathway while I'm here for heavy fuel oil to the boiler. So I have 3 valves that need to be opened here, and then 1 valve over here, assuming that I'm already supplying diesel oil to the diesel generators. Okay, off to the combustion page for a while. So start the diesel oil pump, change over valve to DO, and select diesel oil burner. I kind of feel like these might be out of order. Probably we should switch this valve before turning on the pump, so it's not being switched over across high pressure. So switch over that guy. We're going to turn on our pump and select diesel oil. At this point, I just want to make sure my pump is functioning. It's built up pressure. I don't have any flow, but that's okay because it's not going anywhere. So sometimes we have recirculating loops. This guy is just being dead-ended against a few valves. So I'm okay that it's not, I don't have any flow, but I'm happy to see that I'm building up pressure. Okay, start the FD fan. So that's known as the boiler air fan on the screen. And turn that guy on. Set the 4 controllers to manual, the master at 7, the fuel flow and oxygen controllers at 10. So I want to go manual. This guy would be my 7. My airflow controller doesn't get mentioned here. Oil flow I want to set to 10. My oxygen controller, I'm going to manually set that guy to 10. The airflow should be set at 100 and the purge cycle initiated. So in manual, we're going to go to 100 and we're going to start our purge. When I start my purge, what we'll see is that this flap is open because I set it to 100. I've got some louvers that open up and allow flow into the boiler. And so I'm blasting through a bunch of air to clear out any non-combustibles or any combustibles that are in the furnace. So my purge cycle just completed, so the button popped out and these guys went black and my flow rate is dropping down. So when the purge cycle is complete, change the airflow controller value to 10. So I'm going to do that. Don't move on to the next step too quick. Give it some time to actually get down to 10. Otherwise, you risk blowing out the flame. Reset any boiler trip. Reset this guy. Hopefully none come back up. If you do, you'll have to troubleshoot them. And then press burner 1 on-off button. It's going to start by creating a pilot flame. After a few seconds, my main fuel valve is going to open up, allowing my main flame to be started. I also get air that's now being blasted in, and hopefully I should have stable combustion. If your flame goes out at this point, you got to check a few things. First of all, that you do have a supply of fuel. So your main fuel is actually supplied. Your switchover valves are in the right position, or else that you haven't made a mistake with your air and fuel ratios. So looks like my flame is on and stable. I'm going to do a bit of adjustment to it now. So number 10, pressure should now be raised according to standard boiler practice, according to the scenario conditions selected. Following sequence will bring the boiler online within 1 hour. So basically telling us to follow the next series of steps, and it should be about an hour worth of time. So decrease the airflow controller to 1 and decrease the fuel controller value to 4. So to 1 and over to 4. Allowing the burner to fire continuously, then go to MD82. So I'm going to make sure that this guy is firing continuously. But what I just did there is I adjusted the amount of air and fuel going in. So basically the oil amount is really directly translated to how much heat is being produced inside the furnace. So the more oil I can put in, the more possible heat I can create. So first thing that I did is I turned down the amount of oil that went in. I also adjusted the air. So air and oil have to have a certain mixture in order to burn properly. If I have too much air, then um, I risk having the flame blow out. I risk having some inefficiencies in combustion. If I have too much oil compared to air, then I risk having unburnt fuel going into the furnace. I risk creating a bunch of smoke. And so what I want to have is just the right balance between air and oil. So they've given me a range. And if I kind of look over here at the gauges, just at this point, I have quite a bit of excess oxygen in the exhaust gas, low smoke. I think I could probably play with that a little bit more to get a better combustion. But at this point, we'll just follow the instructions. So what it told me next is to go to page 82. And what we are doing now is warming up the boiler. I have a couple of vents open right now. I have a superheater vent, which is hopefully allowing a little bit of flow of air or potentially steam to pass through my superheater. I need to protect my superheater in this boiler from the high flame, as it's really one of the first things that the high temperature is going to hit. And without any steam or air going through it, I want to make sure that it is protected. And I protect it by making sure I have some fluid that moves through that can absorb some of the heat. Also in the boiler, what I have is a vent off of the drum. So as water is heating up, it's going to drive off some of the dissolved oxygen and other gases. And so I want to be able to vent that out as well. So I've got a couple of vents open, and it's telling me in the instructions when the steam drum gets above 105 degrees Celsius, shut the boiler vent valve and the superheater steam line vent valve. So I'm in a point of waiting, so I'm going to speed up time a bit here. You can speed up time by pushing F5 and adjust your simulation speed ratio. So you could, maybe we could go up to 25 or something here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring myself up close to the boiling point. If I look at what I'm going to do when I get up there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut my vents and I'm going to start warming up the next section of piping. So open up the steam line drain and open up the main shutoff valve. So this valve, which is mislabeled, so just be careful on the the valve tag. It's incorrect. And I'm going to open up my drain so that now I'm warming up this section of piping. When it says fully open, normally in real operation, we would slowly open up that valve so that we don't suddenly pressurize this line or overheat this line quickly. So we would have a slow ramp up on that line. We're almost there, so 86 degrees, 87 degrees. We've ticked off about 50 minutes at this point of startup. We want to slowly warm up this boiler, so we have a low flame, we have a low output. We don't want to overheat this boiler during startup. Give it time to expand and warm up together. So I'm going to slow this down. You can see that I'm now at the point of getting warm. I've passed what we consider to be our normal boiling point, so 102 degrees, and I'm starting to build up a bit of pressure. And what's happening inside the boiler is I'm creating some steam, and all that steam has to go to one of two places. It either vents out, or else it essentially builds up as pressure inside. And so right now I have a mixture. I've got some pressure that's building and going out the vent. And the building of pressure is what's allowing me to raise my boiling point. So we always have a relationship between pressure and temperature within a boiler. So I'm just going to speed it up a little bit more. And pretty soon I'll be up to 105. And close off the boiler vent and close off the superheater vent. I'm not so sure that I want this guy closed just yet, to be honest. If I close this off, then I have no flow through the system at all, and if I'm still heating up, I still have a risk to my superheater. I'll follow the instructions in this case, but I think that in real operation, we should be keeping that vent open for a while until we have at least some positive steam flow through some other systems. But I'll close it off, open up the drain, and then I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly open this guy up. So I'm going to say like 0.1% and allow that pressure to grow a little more conservatively through there. And maybe I can open it up a little bit more, say to 1%. And then eventually, now that I'm pretty close in pressure, I'm going to go up to 100%. This process should take a little bit of time of me warming up the steam line. It's going to be a case where I'm going to need to warm up all of my piping, so it represents it as a small run in this, but who knows, that run might be hundreds of meters long and might take a while for it to warm up. I have my drain to allow any condensate that collects to drain out, and so I have some positive steam flow from my boiler, and it will be warming up this line, and we can start to see that it's starting to get hot inside of that pipe. So moving on, open a few steam heating valves. So go to my combustion page, and I've got my steam heating system, which is here and here. And I'm going to start my HFO pump. If I start my HFO pump, what we see is that I've got no flow and no pressure coming out of here. This guy isn't really functional for me. Well, a few things are happening. First of all is that my steam lines are full of heavy fuel oil, and heavy fuel oil will congeal and will be very difficult for me to move through a pipe. So until I warm it up, which is the role of the steam tracing, so it's basically steam heating on the outside of pipes to warm them up, I'm not going to get any flow. And so I have this steam heater that recirculates, but part of the problem that I have is that my tank is very cold right now. So even if I can pull some heavy fuel oil out of the tank, I don't have very much capacity because this tank is all congealed too. So one of the things that we need to do that isn't in the instructions is just make sure that we are as well heating up the tank. And really, we're not going to get any kind of consistent operation of the heavy fuel oil system until we've raised that temperature up to, I think, somewhere in the range of like 33 degrees, is going to allow us to have consistent operation on the heavy fuel side. So we're going to have to wait for that guy to get up to temperature. So I got a few more steps. Start the HFO pump. Got that guy. Open the atomizing steam valve. So that's down here. I'll probably get an error just because that's lower than what it's expecting, but we're in the process of warming up. Over my instructions. When the main steam line pressure rises to 1, shut the steam line vent. So making the assumption that we've warmed up and pressurized this line, can close off that drain. The next couple of steps are a little bit confusing at times. When the level in the steam drum drops below -10, open the boiler main feed valve, put the feed controller in manual, start the main feed pump, and adjust the manual output to 10%. So we kind of did that at the very start. I didn't I didn't wait until this step to adjust the water level. I think at the very starting point, your most important piece when operating a boiler is going to be water. If I get too high of water, I've got the potential for carryover. If I get too low, then I've got the potential to damage my boiler. So I want to make sure that before I even start this thing that I can adjust my level. I do have water that I can put in. The other thing that I want to make sure is that I have it within my expected range. So waiting until I've already started pressurizing the boiler to see if I can even add in water, to me seems like an error. Also, in this case, you may not even drop below -10. So the way it's worded is that you may end up stalled here for an hour or two while you're waiting for this guy to drop. And frankly, it's kind of confusing. So it says raise the water level to +75, stop the pump, monitor the water level if it drops below -75. But really what they're saying is get the water level into some level that it's going to be operational. If it starts to drop, add in some more water. Don't just leave the pump deadheaded against a valve at this point because we're still a ways away from actually using a bunch of steam. So if we turn on the pump, we're just going to be wasting energy and wearing out the pump if we're running it against a closed valve. So we get to this next step if we consider that these guys have already been done. When the boiler pressure reaches 8 bar, the low atomizing steam pressure and HFO temp alarms should be reset. They'll actually go away around 5. When the alarms have reset, what it's referring to is going to be here and here. Alarm should reset. When alarms have reset, switch number 1 burner off at the on-off button. So these guys have reset. My pressure is building, but if we look at what's happening here, as I said, we need to get this guy up to at least temperature. So make sure that before you start doing any kind of switch over, that you've got this guy up in the, as I said, 33, 35 degree range as a minimum. Otherwise, you're not going to get consistent flow out of your tank. So at some point, what's going to happen is I'm going to deem myself ready to turn off my burner. Switching off the burner is always something you can do. It's always a safe choice. So if you ever get to the point where your pressure's building up too high, I'd never want to overpressurize my boiler and rely on safety relief valves to go off. So I don't want to get this boiler up to my maximum of 8 bar. So if I ever get up to say 7, I'm going to start to consider turning off the burner. The pressure will keep rising because I have so much residual heat just stored up in the furnace itself that it's still going to keep absorbing and keep pressurizing the boiler. So if I get up in that range, what I want to do is turn off the burner. In any event, I think I'm okay to switch over to HFO mode, even though I haven't met my 7 bar pressure. So I'm going to start that process here. So switch it off, number 1 burner at the on-off button. So I'll turn that guy off. Change over the switchover valve and switch the HFO type to, or burner type to HFO. Put the airflow, fuel flow, and oxygen controllers in auto, and then finally put the master controller in auto. So what these guys are doing is I have a master controller which essentially dictates everything, and what it's doing is it's reading the steam pressure in the boiler, and it's going to decide how much burner output does it need to meet the oil and airflow. How much oil and air to put into the burner in order to maintain whatever set pressure. So right now I'm below pressure in the boiler, 6.1, and I'm trying to get to 7. So what will happen is once this starts, it's going to raise my oil and airflow levels. I don't want to do this when I'm a long way away, because what's going to happen is the master controller is going to look at a big difference of pressure, and it's going to really raise my oil and airflow, and that defeats my purpose of warming up the boiler slowly. So I want to make sure that I'm close. If I'm not, I can always stay in manual mode for a bit and raise that pressure. So master controller decides how much total heat to put out, which is dictated by an amount of oil, and then an amount of air is provided to meet that oil, which is decided by how much oxygen I want left over. So right now what I'm saying is I want 1.5% oxygen to remain in the exhaust gases. So it's going to find the appropriate amount of air to mix and burn. So I have really 4 controllers, and really what these guys are doing is deciding the output in order to meet a certain pressure in the boiler. And then it's going to adjust the oil, and then these guys down here decide how much air needs to go to match up with the amount of oil I'm putting in. So pressure is related to oil, the combustion is related to the air and oxygen added to the oil. Reset the boiler trip. The burner management light should switch on. So now switch it on. You can see right away my boiler triggered to start up a purge. So what the burner management system is doing is it's making decisions on starting and stopping the burner for me. Depending on where you sit with your pressure, you may not get to that point. It may be off, so it may not be functioning for you. And that's okay. If it's up to pressure, it's not going to. The burner management decides, first of all, if the pressure gets too low, to turn on the burner, and it will go through its purge cycle. It will adjust its air and fuel ratios. It will also, if the pressure gets too high, automatically shut off the burner itself. So you can see right now, even though my manual output is 0, my pressure was rising and my flame just extinguished. Well, it didn't get puffed out. What happened is it decide it better turn itself off because the pressure was getting too high. This is your safety piece, your main safety piece for the combustion side of the boiler. So you want to make sure that you have some automatic controls that's going to decide to turn it on and off, essentially replacing the decision making of the operator before you walk away. So up until the point of having that burner management system on, we were always in a dangerous position whenever we left the boiler unattended. So our pressure, if it started to rise, nothing was going to stop it. The only thing that would trip the boiler was going to be things like low water level, high water level, but nowhere along the line was it going to trip in this case because of too high of pressure. And that's just the way that the controls are set up on this boiler. So on to step 25, stop the DO pump as the boiler is now operating in HFO mode. So we're going to turn that guy off. We want to still leave the pathway open to the boiler because it still relies on the pilot light to start. So when this restarts, I need a bit of diesel oil to restart the pilot. And then step number 26. So I need to worry about my water side. So the main feed pump should now be started and left running. Okay, well, if I start it now, it's just going to overflow the boiler. It's on, it's left in manual was the last step that we had left it. And I'm not even sure if we left that valve open or not. So a couple of strategies for getting this guy up to the right level. Often if you're just leaving it from manual mode and switching it to auto, it takes a long time to get yourself into the right position. I've brought it up to being pretty close. I'm going to start it at 0, so I'm going to close off this valve. Get myself, I think, pretty close because I don't really need to have a lot of water going in. And I'm guessing as to where the set point is for the controls. I'm going to turn on my pump and I'm going to switch it to auto. And at this point, I'm going to let it adjust. And I think it will be able to get me pretty close to 0 at this point. What's happening with the level control is it looks at a few things. First thing it looks at is what is the level in the boiler. So over here, it's giving me a measure of what my level is. It's giving me a measure of how much steam is leaving, and it's giving me a measure of how much water is coming in. And so it's adjusting this valve based on all of those parameters. And so whenever I get into auto mode, what I want to make sure is that, yes, I do have a case where my boiler does have some flow coming out so that it's expecting some steam loss. I have my pathways open and my pump on, so it's expecting changes to affect the flow coming in. And I want to make sure that my level is fairly close so that I don't have a substantial change to rely on the auto controller to do. So you can see it's now in auto mode, and I'm pretty close to my set point, so 3. So at this point, just do one final check. I've got my water in the right range. It's auto control. I have the ability and pathway for water to flow in. There's water available in my feed water tank. I look at my pathway. I've got my vents closed, my drains closed, and my steam piping is open, and it's supplying steam to my consumers. And at this point, I could increase the number of consumers. My burner management system is on, and all of my controllers are in automatic. My HFO system is flowing, recirculating, and my tank is being heated. And I think I'm pretty happy with where I sit at this point.